Imagine the whole church discovering their passion to care, one small group at a time. You're listening to this special podcast series, Care Journey, from the Journey with Care podcast.
I think one of the biggest things that it's helped me do is more empathy and grace, but also kind of ties into what God was already doing before and making this more sustainable. That this isn't about something that I need to do or I need to fix, but this is God calling me into these places, and sometimes it's just sitting with people, sometimes it's just holding the baby that's crying.
Welcome back to another episode of Journey with Care. We are in our Care Journey series, a series highlighting some of the topics that are core to the work of Care Impact in the community and their work with Care Portal. And we actually developed this small group course that goes deep on each of these topics. But what we want to do is give you a glimpse into some of them, give you some real stories, some real voices that hopefully inspire you, and maybe it'll spark interest in going deeper and taking the course or getting involved with Care Portal, and maybe not, but that's fine. So today we are talking about radical presence in hard places. We are bringing on a special guest, Mel. And interviewing Mel, we have a guest host. We are bringing back Tim, who is part of our Care Impact team. He's hosted a few episodes already in the past. But before we get into the interview, I want to remind you that we have our Journey with Prayer 5-minute devotional series to start off your week. That's on a separate feed. You can find it there in the show notes or head over to our website where you can get it on Friday, the same time as this one comes out. I also want to remind you that this show exists because of the generosity of our donors, of our listeners, those who want to sow into the work of Care Impact in the community. If you want to get involved in any way, if you want to support us, head over to careimpact.ca or journeywithcare.ca, and there are links there for you to be able to do that. We have some needs on the podcast, equipment upgrades, ongoing costs associated with getting this out every week. So if you want to contribute to helping keep us going, that would be amazing. So Tim, welcome back as our host again on the podcast. You want to briefly tell us about what we're going to be talking about today and our guest?
Thanks, Johan. It's great to be back. And yes, you know me, this is a topic near and dear to my heart. Being able to lead a team of trauma care trainers as part of what we're doing with Care Impact across Canada is one of the gifts that I get to participate in. And we have Mel on. And Mel, it's great to have you on the podcast. Our families go back to a friendship between our grandparents, I guess, and then our parents, and a church connection in the greater Ottawa area. I'm from Ottawa, and you live just outside Ottawa. Still, I'm a little further out here on the East Coast now. Can you tell us a little bit more about your family, Mel?
Sure, and thanks for having me today, guys. Yeah, so my husband, Chris, and I have been married for 20 years, and we lived in Alberta for a bit and back in Ontario. And we have two daughters, 18 and 16. And we are a foster home of usually kiddos 2 and under. And we've been doing that for about 10 years. And we also host international students as well.
So great to have you. And you've recently joined our trauma care training team.
Yes.
That's exciting. We're truly blessed to have you on board. Can you share a bit about your journey in this topic of trauma care?
Sure. Like I said, we've been fostering now for about 10 years. And when we started this and the training that was offered to us, we threw around words like trauma and attachment and some of those things. But I don't think anyone really knew or understood at that time what that looked like and the impact it had on kids and how it affected their brains and their development. And so when I started learning a little bit more about trauma care and trauma training, maybe almost 2 years ago now, I got hooked on it pretty quickly, and it has become life-changing in our story and what we're doing fostering, and even in my own day-to-day life, parenting my own kids and just walking among people in our lives that have come from hard places.
It's beautiful. And as you've shared your story, we've chatted even before this moment together, your 10 years in this space of caring for kids that are not biological to you and Chris in your home has been a journey of learning really, and watching God guide you in practices that now you have language for, perhaps, or a lens for where that fits in this idea of trauma care. So we're talking today on this podcast about being radically present with those who are in or are from hard places. So some of the folks, as you're sharing, in your circle, the children who come into your home, the families that are connected to those children you've been sharing, and we'll hear that a bit in your story in a few minutes. But the families of those children are carrying hard things. And so the language you and I might use is those carrying trauma. But for the general population, the idea of coming from hard places or carrying hard things sometimes resonates a bit more easily. So from the research that we share and the trainings that we lead, you and I, a large percentage of our population is actually carrying trauma, right? And so this episode, we're really looking at this idea of withness. So not being a bystander and just looking and seeing the hard time that people might be having, or simply jumping in and offering a quick fix, but actually finding a way to simply be there, to be present with them. And this is what I hear from your story, what our listeners are going to get to hear over the next few minutes from your story. So this idea that we're going to lean into, and you'll hear from Mel as she shares, this idea of empathy and compassion, to be there, to listen, to be a shoulder. And as Mel and I even were talking, sometimes that person's in the mirror. Sometimes we need to encourage that person having a hard time in the mirror. You're not alone, and to seek out that connection. So Mel, can you tell us initially what drew you to work in this space of caring for those who are carrying trauma?
Sure. I think originally 10, probably even 12 years ago, I'm at home with my girls and have been blessed to be able to do that. And they now do school from home. When they were starting to become that school age, I had really been praying and asking God, what can I do to serve you from home? And over time, it was probably almost a 2-year journey that he took me on of preparing my heart and opening my eyes to foster care. And I didn't have a lot of experience with it. I was naive with how much was around us at the time and what the needs were. And so Chris and I started that journey, and we were probably about 2 years with our training and all the application and home studies and stuff. So we got our first little guy almost 10 years ago. And I know when I started this journey, probably like most people, I wanted to be faithful and I wanted to help and protect kids that needed that support and that help. And I really struggled for the first little bit, and I really kept the families and kids separate. I felt that I needed to do that to protect my own heart. And although I was not judgmental or angry or upset with maybe the bio families, but I didn't really give an opportunity to hold space for them or find a way to maybe kind of be in it together, I guess. And the last 2 years, my journey has really taken a turn, and we had a placement that was very difficult and very isolating, and she had quite a few medical needs, and I kind of hit a wall. It was hard. It was hard on our family. And when she was reunified with her family, we needed a little break, and we took a little break. And through that time, though, God started to work in my heart and change what he wanted out of our journey in foster care. And he started stripping away some of the savior mentality and this, you need to do this right. You need to do this to make this okay. You need to do this to make the kiddo okay. You need to do this to make sure your family's okay. And I think that's part of me hitting a wall a bit, is that I was trying to still do quite a bit of it with my own. I've got this, I can do this. I have the skills. I have, some of the knowledge. And God just really started to chip away at that and bring me to this place of seeing the family, seeing the child and the family for who they are and how much he loves them as a family. Also for taking myself out of the equation. Although it is definitely still a constant battle, I am learning that this is where he needs me to be right now, and shifting that perspective of I need to do this, but just do what I'm capable of doing in God's time. And with the trauma, and then as he started to work away at my heart there, I then did a TBRI satellite day conference, probably 2 years ago now. And that really changed. I couldn't believe the content that we were hearing and how much I knew this was going to be impactful for what we're doing. And at the end of the conference, Amy Jo was representing Care Impact and sharing about what you guys do. And so that led me to reconnecting with Amy Jo and Tim and started this journey of digging deeper into what trauma care looks like and understanding what families and kids have gone through and being able to walk with them in a different way than I had before.
It's beautiful. So you've been on this 10-year journey, a way that God has given you and Chris as a family to walk alongside those in hard places has been through foster care. It's not a journey that everyone takes, and it's a journey for the brave and the humble, right? But you've been on this learning journey, and now you've taken this step in the last couple of years, like you said, to get training and now actually to turn around and become a trainer. Can you share a little bit about what has given you that added step now recently to want to turn around and train others with this content?
Yeah, sure. When I did the Hope Conference and then I did the advanced training with you guys, it was life-changing. I can't even describe to people how beneficial it's been and how much it has really just changed my perspective and understanding on trauma and how it has affected kids and their families. And my lens is foster care and my lens is younger kids because that's what we've done. But it also made me more aware of all the people that I am walking with that are coming from really hard places. And I think one of the biggest things that it's helped me do is more empathy and grace, but also kind of ties into what God was already doing before and making this more sustainable. That this isn't about something that I need to do or I need to fix, but this is God calling me into these places. And sometimes it's just sitting with people. Sometimes it's just holding the baby that's crying. And sometimes it's trying to encourage a bio mom or a bio dad or those little pieces.
So you're seeing an importance in the whole community, in a sense, being equipped in some way.
Yes, I think that after I did this training, it really, I think, opened my eyes to how many different people are walking with people with hard spaces, whether it's pastors, leadership, teachers, other foster families, adoptive families, kin families. And I think that's kind of where I got that passion from, is that I know how life-changing it was for me to be able to continue this journey and to be sustainable, and seeing the burnout from those around me of wanting to care for people in hard places, but maybe not having the full equipment that they need for the job. When we're fully equipped, we can do the job better and safer. And I think that there's still a big need of wanting to get some of this information out and help others understand those that they're walking life with, whether it's their job or mission or family, friends.
I love it. Yeah, you're a mom, you're a foster mom, you're a church member, you're a community member, you're very connected in your community in various levels. And speaking from each of those roles, you're saying, I need to be equipped in these areas. And then there's more areas you've even spoken to that are roles that aren't yours, that you're recognizing the support that being able to be equipped with this, meeting people in hard places or meeting people with a trauma care lens is helpful, you're finding is even vital, I hear you saying, I think.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
So good. Well, we love stories on the podcast. Could you share a story of a time when you witnessed significant transformation in a person or a community due to this having a trauma care lens to building connection?
Sure. And this is kind of a story even before I fully understood about trauma and its impact. And I'm thankful too that God was gracious in our journey. And, I had some equipment before we started this. And we had this little girl that was with us. She came to us. She was 18 months old. And she was the most lost little person I'd ever seen. She would just walk around our house and she didn't know how to sit and play. She didn't know how to kind of eat well in a high chair. Sleep was very dysregulated. There's lots of little signs that were going off that now I understand a little bit more about. That was probably a trauma response to something she had, experienced or witnessed. But I think one of the things that God was gracious with is that through what I know now too, that to be true is, showing up for these kids, being a constant in their life, having consistency, routine, being neutral kind of being with them as they figure out in their little brains how to be calmer, how to just be, how to breathe. And so she was the most significant one in my head because she was really about the 3-month mark. And we all of a sudden, just it's almost as if her little body just went, and she could breathe, and she was settled, and she started learning how to play with toys, and she started walking better. And some of these little things that I know now, she wasn't able to do before because she was in such a state of dysregulation and fear, most likely. And even one of our current placements is, again, 18 months, and he has a lot going on in his little life. And I feel this kind of more strength and more understanding now about what he's probably been through, even though I don't know it all. But knowing now, okay, this is why, this is hard for him, or this is why he's dysregulated right now. And I'm able to just be with him and be a constant and be a routine for him and be a safe place, so that hopefully it takes a little bit of that stress off of his little brain and body, and he doesn't have to worry about, where am I being fed? What am I being fed? Am I sleeping? I'm tired. Do I get a nap? Do I not get a nap? All those kinds of things. So yeah, that's kind of been my couple stories that I have like right now, just showing up and kind of just doing the things. Now I know I don't have to fix him. I don't have to fix his family. I don't have to do certain things to make sure the outcome is a certain way, which has kind of given me a bit more lightness and freedom, I guess, in this journey that we're on.
That's beautiful. So it sounds like the pressure's off in one sense of trying to do everything. At the same time, it allows you, that pressure being off allows you to be more present, which is exactly what, like you and I would know from the training, the science is telling us, and the Bible already tells us, our hearts are already telling us, we just want to be present. It sounds like you have that freedom with this equipping that you have. And I love that desire in you to be able to see others have that freedom to know how to be with. We use a recurring theme in our training, right? That see the need behind the behavior. And it's easy to just try and do something about the behaviors and even get exhausted trying to help with the behaviors, when really there's a need below that, isn't there?
I think we get hung up on the why. Why did this, why are they acting this way? Why? We want to figure it out. And it's not really about figuring it out all the time. It's just being with them.
Love it. And the context, once again, that you have for building connection is with these little ones in your home. But I feel that as I was listening to you, giving some tips, which our listeners caught hopefully a few moments ago, about consistent connection, you had a number of things you just shared. Those are tools. Those are intentionalities we can carry in all our relationships. So good. Has there been a particular individual whose resilience and recovery has deeply inspired you? And maybe it's one of those little ones that you've just shared stories about. But as we look at the behaviors, we look at the challenges, often it's like, oh man, what do we do with this? And we need to lean into those stories of hope where we see change, like you've been sharing. And then to see the power of that individual to say yes to the withness that you're offering.
We had one little girl, and I did kind of reference her before. She had a lot of high needs and a lot of high medical needs. And God had already started, we had her working away at my heart, and I think probably stripping away some of the things that needed to go. And one of those pieces was, I struggled with the view of reunification, and it was more of a selfish piece. And I struggled I'm kind of black and white. So it was really tricky for me sometimes kiddos be reunified into different situations, sometimes with family, sometimes back home. But God had started planting this in my head of what reunification looked like. And I got to see reunification with this little girl and her family in a really, really lovely way. And I got to do it with one of my girls. It was actually a really neat thing. We had dropped her off for a weekend overnight visit, and her and I are both, feeling our feelings of driving away and, the letting go piece that's hard to do. And my daughter was a bit emotional, and I said to her, but look at how happy her face is when she sees her people. These are her people. They're who she knows, and they're working so hard that they want to care for her. And it may not look the way I think it should look or wanted it to look or anything like that, So that's just one of the stories that sticks out in my head. And I know it was part of my journey that the Lord had me on, of like just that whole picture of this, of, understanding the trauma piece and understanding families, and then of course what God was doing for me and chipping away some of those things I had to let go of.
Thank you for that story. Yeah, as we're thinking of this being radically present, as you mentioned earlier, this idea of a savior mentality can come in, where the withness is about them staying with me. Now I'm the one that can be with them. And I love your lens into that family and saying, and she being with her family and me doing everything I can to support that is withness also, right? What she needs is withness, and she needs her family. I love that, Mel. And yet so heart-tearing, right? When we have to go through that process of, we were with you, we were your person, and little people, as much as any of us, and even more so, need that consistent witness, right? And so those moments are so difficult and so important. Taking a little turn here, this idea of witness, being present with those in hardship, is so central to your work, to our work. And can you recount a time when simply being present has had a significant impact? Just simply being present.
I kind of have two stories. One is with it's someone not through foster care lens, and just someone I know in the community. She has come from some really, really hard places, and I had to learn through some of my fostering journey and some other experiences of, and then again with this trauma care lens of really just okay, this is how I can be here for her, and this is what I can do, this is what I can't do. And I find that I'm able to hold a lot more space for that. So when we're having those conversations, or she's, talking about the hard things, I no longer feel like I have to just jump in and kind of fix and do those kind of pieces. And then I think, from the foster care lens, our current little guy, he has a lot going on, and I have been able to be there for him after his visits. And there are times when he is pretty dysregulated and pretty sad, and just being able to be there, and he's learning how to snuggle and be held and all those kinds of things. And so I am very thankful that I have this lens now, that I can do this with him and be intentional about just being there, and more understanding of why he's crying. This is not just, what people might think is a temper tantrum, or I didn't get my way. It's all the pieces for their little brains and their little bodies. And one of the things too that I've really tried to incorporate into what I'm doing right now, that I've learned that I didn't know before taking the course, is this idea of modeling and trying to give words and help kids have words. So even though he's not really verbal yet, because he's not two, just being like, oh, you're feeling really sad today. And yeah, it's really hard when we have to drive away from this family member, or I know you love them so much, and I know it's confusing for you to be here. I think before I was very much like, oh, I don't want to bring up the hard things in case I trigger them, and then they're more upset. And that's been something I've had to kind of push myself a bit, because my initial reaction is no, don't stir the pot. Don't bring up the things, but they're already there. And I think I'm more aware of that than I was before. Of they're already there. He's already feeling these things. And so, yeah, just kind of talking it out with him, even though he's not talking back, but just giving him some of those things that hopefully as he gets, it does get more verbal, he can maybe have some more ways to help express himself so he can get the help that he needs.
That's beautiful. So what I hear, Mel, is this idea of being physically present to your friend or to this little guy. You're physically there with them. But I'm also hearing you being emotionally present, not just reacting to it, but actually being present in those emotions. And now I'm also hearing you saying you're being verbally present, allowing your words, as opposed to trying to fix, but allowing your words to offer verbal presence. It's amazing how many different ways we can be present with another, isn't it? As you've been present with this friend or this little guy, how have you seen them react to that kind of simple presence in your support?
I think for the friend I think she knows that she has someone that she can say the things to. And sometimes it's bouncing off ideas, and sometimes it's just the listening piece. I hope she knows that she can, share those things. I think for littles, it's a little bit trickier because they're not talking and you can't, it's kind of like a one-way thing. But I think just being that calm and that neutral will hopefully be able to be impactful that way in our relationship.
So good. Behaviors are this, as we talk about in our trauma care training, they're a tip of the iceberg, but they're a really pokey tip. They really make a difference in our days, don't they? Those big behaviors, and I feel like they can turn our days upside down often. Do you have an example of how you've navigated a challenging behavior using this trauma care lens, or this realizing somebody's coming from a hard place? You want to practice withness, and you've navigated that behavior differently. You've shared a few examples already, but if you just share maybe one more in a pointed way here.
Well, currently, because we've got, a little guy, one of the things I learned from the course too, just how important snacks and water can be and a drink. And so sometimes he comes back from visits and I don't know the last time he ate or how much he ate. So I'm trying to be more mindful about that and just kind of start that before, it kind of gets too far. Sometimes there's moments where, say, I have to change his diaper and he's really upset from something. Sometimes I'll sing or like recite a little book that I have memorized or those kinds of things of just still bringing that calm. I guess we say that in the course too, like bring your calm for them when they are not. And so those are kind of a little few examples that I do right now with my little guy, but I'll often use like music or a snack or something to try and engage him too when we're able to in play, because I also know that they can kind of come down a little bit too if we can, get playing with something or build something together.
That's beautiful. I think when we talk about the training, it has this word trauma attached to it, trauma care training. And it sounds like this really big, maybe scary thing. And then you're sharing with us, and the two of us know as we do this training, sometimes the surprise is it's that practical. It's a snack and a drink. It's putting on some music. That's trauma-informed care. And it really is that practical. Being alongside someone, that withness is so practical, isn't it? So simple. Is there a particular advice? You've shared a bunch of really great things already. Is there a particular piece of advice you would give to a caregiver supporting someone who has trauma? Is there something that stands out for you?
I think that what you just touched on too is really important to share. Although it is life-changing, a lot of it is practical and a lot of the things we're already doing. And it's just kind of getting that information behind like why you're doing it. And then some of it is, some of it was definitely like brand new information of like, oh, it's almost more simple than I've been trying to make it. I know I've been doing this for 10 years and I know that God's brought me on a journey of my own personal piece in this and what I've had to learn, and he's probably going to continue to teach me and strip away more and more things. But I think too in the last little bit, also, this idea of like, I think it's important to make sure you're taking care of yourself. And if you're working with people from hard places, making sure you've started or done your own work so that you're not triggered, that you're not burnt out, that you are not, maybe being hurt by something that isn't actually intended at you or anything like that. I think that's an important thing to bring to the table. We don't want to put our stuff onto kids that don't need anything extra on them. I think that's been important in my journey too of doing that and making sure that I'm doing those pieces as well while dealing with and working with people and kids in trauma.
That's so good. So I'm hearing two things. The first I heard you sharing is these things are so practical that many of us have already been doing a lot of them. And the encouragement of we might be doing a lot of these pieces. We might be missing a key puzzle piece and the thing's not fitting together. It's not working out, but also the encouragement to keep doing what we're doing and just understand the why. So we can really just practice it. I know we were sharing before as you're sharing your story, and to be able to stick this through long term for the kids that you've cared for in your home, you have to know you're doing the right thing even when it's not working out. Just to consistently be with, in this holistic sense, mentally, emotionally, physically, all of that going on, just verbally, with your little guy, just saying those things over and over again. You're not seeing change because it's about long-term change. Trauma has a very large impact in its breadth and depth, and it takes time, doesn't it? So just be consistent and know why and know you're doing the right thing and that it's simple and practical. Just keep going. The other thing I heard you sharing was this idea of self-care. Now, just rounding out our conversation, we're talking in the context of being part of a church community. And as you know, Care Impact is passionate about seeing the church across Canada equipped and connected to be able to be with those in hard places. So why is trauma care crucial for the church community in your understanding?
I think we would be naive to say that there are many, many people in our pews that are either have come from hard places or are going through hard things at that time. Maybe they didn't necessarily grow up with significant trauma or complex trauma, but I think most people are pretty aware that people are really struggling right now, whether it's from a past or even something current. The need is there. And I go back to that word, like being equipped to be able to be with them. And I think just understanding our leadership to whether it's kids ministry or, life groups or Sunday morning, of understanding, okay, this is what's going on here. And so these are ways that we can either help or sit with or, direct people if there's, obviously more help is needed. So I think that the church definitely needs to be a very good tool for that, especially I think now too, like we know so much more than we did even 10 years ago. And I think when we know better, we can do better. And I think that there's a responsibility in that as well, that if we're going to continue to walk with people from hard places, that we are getting that information and that knowledge of how to do it well.
Good. So I hear you saying, the church is called to care for those in hard places, and they're out there, but actually they're also in here. They're in the pews or the chairs or right in our community. It's so important. How do you see this caring for those from hard places with a trauma care lens fits with faith principles?
I think just like my own personal journey with it was, the piece I struggled with was, I felt God calling me to do this, but I was also like, okay, God, I got this. And then, taking off and, running too far ahead. And when we look back at what God's actually asking us to do and what his role is, those are very, very different. And so I think making sure we stay in our own lane and pointing towards Jesus, walking beside people, holding space for people, empathy. And then, if we need to point in a direction, to pastoral care or counseling or, different things like that, then do so, of course. But just that piece of like really, taking yourself out of the equation in those spaces has really been a really big learning curve for me and a really impactful one. And I'm thankful that God didn't leave me where I was, trying to continue to do this, more running ahead of him than I should have. And it definitely feels so much more sustainable and healthy and a lot less pressure that I've put on myself now to fix that. We want to help those that we love. We want to help those around us. And sometimes helping isn't the way we're used to helping or what we think it looks like or what we've done in the past.
Yeah, I love the name for God, the name for Jesus of Emmanuel, God with us. And when I think of God coming to save the world, he comes with skin on. He comes as a human forever, which I think is one of the theologies that most blows my mind right now, that God became human forever. In fact, a wounded human forever. He has wounds in his hands and his side. So that idea of him being with us embodied, and then we are his church, right? He's now with the broken and the hurting through us, through his church. And as we already said, sometimes we need the with right here in terms of accepting somebody else with us, embodying Jesus to us. Looking ahead, as we look to wrap up the episode here, what changes do you hope to see in your community or in your church related to trauma care?
I think just continue. I mean, hopefully some modeling, and I'm part of a support group for foster and adoptive and kin moms. And so we do like little tidbits of training stuff there, but that's something that I'm pretty passionate about right now. And so I'm hoping that through some of that stuff and through some of those conversations that I'm having with other people that are kind of walking similar paths as me, I also, have quite a few teacher connections. And I think it'd be really great if we can start being able to share and equip, this training to not just within our church, right? Where people are everywhere that are needing that and that we're walking along beside. Yeah.
Mel, your story is inspirational in how you are allowing this idea of withness and you being equipped to be with those in hard places. How can individuals and communities be part of creating this change where they are?
I think if the opportunity, presents itself for me, sharing a little bit about my personal growth is definitely a big piece of kind of why I've on this new journey of understanding and hopefully helping facilitate trainings for trauma care. I think that there's a lot of people that are struggling and a lot of not understanding some of the behaviors or some of the things that they're seeing with the people they're walking with. And so, I'm hoping to kind of be a light and an encouragement in that area of like, there are other resources out there. There are other things that we can equip ourselves with, whether it's podcast, book, training, all these different options out there. But I think for me, it's just maybe having those conversations and depending on the circumstance, maybe I can share a tidbit here and there, depending on where they're at and if they're, kind of open for that. But I think I'm hoping that, we can just keep sharing this more and more. And I think the word trauma and attachment and all those things that were kind of just words that we said before, people are starting to realize, I think, that there's more to things in there. This information that we have now is crucial in what we do and how we do our day-to-day with our people.
That's so good. Training and equipping is vital. You found it vital on your journey. And yet what I'm hearing from you, how can people be part of creating change? It's sharing stories if you have one, or listening to someone else's story if they have one to share about this idea of being with those in hard places. Beautiful. Mel, before we wrap up, is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners? Perhaps a story of hope or a key takeaway?
I think one of the big things for me that's come on this journey and then I'm reminding myself of daily is that our hope is in Christ and not in, circumstances or what I can and can't do. Because sometimes days are pretty hard and sometimes circumstances seem pretty heavy. But I really do believe that God can heal and can redeem and do these pieces and these stories of my own life, and as well as those that we're walking with. And just hanging on to that, I think, is important and crucial, that He has it at the end of the day, even in the mess and the brokenness that we're sometimes surrounded with. So right now, trying to hold on to those pieces of our hope is in Christ, because it can't be in the circumstances and it can't even really be in people, right? Because people are going to continue to, stumble and fall, and we have to keep our hope looking up.
It's beautiful. And of course, you and I can speak to going to careimpact.ca, where you can express interest in trauma care training, where you can hear more from Mel, more stories, and from the rest of the team. You can request training in your area or sign up for an existing course there. Thank you, Mel, for coming onto the podcast. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences and insights with us today.
Thank you very much for having me today.
Thank you for joining another conversation on Journey with Care, where we inspire curious Canadians on their path of faith and living life with purpose in community. Journey with Care is an initiative of Care Impact, a Canadian charity dedicated to connecting and equipping the whole church to journey well in community. You can visit their website at careimpact.ca or visit journeywithcare.ca to get more information on weekly episodes, Journey with Prayer, and details about our upcoming events and meetups. You can also leave us a message, share your thoughts, and connect with like-minded individuals who are on their own journeys of faith and purpose. Thank you for sharing this podcast and helping these stories reach the community. Together we can explore ways to journey in a good way. And always remember to stay curious.